It's the Hoffman Show on a Tuesday. Anthony, how is it only Tuesday?
I thought it was Wednesday.
I did too. And then I opened my mouth, and here we are on the radio on a Tuesday. Oy vey. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. All right, it's just, here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Tuesday. The Lakers are no longer in the playoffs. Anthony is very sad. We will talk about that later on in the program. We start, however, with someone else who is no longer participating, or at least didn't participate today. That man's name is Chase Young. This is a cause of great consternation amongst, frankly, both sides of the argument. The "it's voluntary" crowd really has dug their heels in. They are loud. Then there is the "I can't believe there's the it's voluntary" crowd. I will say I listened to the start of Grant and Danny today over on The Fan, and if you missed Danny's rant, it was a good rant. Forget the content, whether you agree with the take, subjectively, very good radio rant. Excellent job, Mr. Funny Danny Rouillet. Not shockingly, I think if you know me, I land somewhere, Anthony, again, this is going to absolutely shock people, somewhere a little in the middle. I'm a lot closer to Danny than I am the "it's voluntary" crowd. I didn't get my clapping emojis right, but that's fine. I'm not trying to completely rip off their bit, so I'll just screw up the rhythm. But this is not good. And that should be good enough for a take, if you will. Here's what I will say before I jump into the reasons why this is not good. This is day one of voluntary OTAs. He is not required to show up in that he is not being insubordinate, right? Also, if he shows up tomorrow and doesn't miss another practice, today doesn't matter. I'm not going to empty the clip proverbially today on Chase Young. However, this is very stupid that he is not there. And that I also feel very comfortable saying. Here's why. Chase Young is someone who needs to become a better football player. This isn't about optics. This isn't about trust. This isn't about proving anything to anyone. This is about whether or not Chase Young is giving himself the best chance to be the guy that they re-sign next offseason. Chase Young is a free agent after this season. Chase Young has not lived up to the hype. Chase Young has not produced anything meaningful in the last couple of years. I thought he was very solid when he came back last year. Clearly not himself, but did a good job. Was much more assignment sound and disciplined, held the point of attack, did a lot of good things that you would hope that are kind of standard if he's Chase Young, and then you hope he adds the Chase Young freaky stuff back on. But he did okay in those 3 games by like regular NFL standards, not by Chase Young wants to be a superstar standards. So if Chase Young goes out, no matter how many practices he goes to over the next 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, whatever it is, till we're done with OTAs, if he misses every single one, shows up to mandatory minicamp because it's mandatory, has a great training camp, or even has a bad training camp, but then goes out and has 16 sacks in the season, you know it's not going to matter? Any of this stuff. Not a lick of it. Which is why, indirectly, this has no bearing on his contract situation. It has no bearing on anything. Or I should say, directly, it doesn't. However, the reason this is a problem is not optics, it's not trust, it's not any of that stuff. It's that Chase Young needs reps. Chase Young is a, no pun intended, young football player. He is an extremely inexperienced football player. He played 3 years at Ohio State, where he was the best athlete on the field, and used that to be dominant, as well as some very solid technique, an intelligence for the game, and a knack for making very special, very unique plays. Like, that's all true. He came in as a rookie. He was good. But playing NFL football, and again, this is just mind-blowing analysis, the kind of stuff you come right here for. Playing NFL football is really, really hard. These are the best players on the planet. They're all super freak athletes. They're all very smart. And most of them work extremely hard. But working hard is not good enough. You have to work on the right things. This is not a 40-yard dash bench press contest. That's the combine. This is not a how good do you look with your shirt off in a workout video contest. That's Instagram. This is a game with a scoreboard, and if you're on the field, you have a chance to affect whether you score or the other team scores, depending on if you play offense or defense. And in Chase Young's case, he's got a lot of responsibility in making sure the other team doesn't. And his mental understanding of that responsibility and his physical ability to go out and execute it, his ability to make decisions and reads in real time. Do I have the opportunity to go make this play by getting underneath the block? Am I working in concert with my teammates like John Allen and Deron Payne, both of whom are far more established in the league, have their big fancy contracts, and showed up today? Do I know how to play off of them in a way that is beneficial, that is going to help us keep the other team from scoring? And maybe because I'm Chase Young, a freaky athlete who does these kinds of things, maybe I even score myself. I get the strip sack. I get the fumble recovery. That's the kind of stuff he does. It's why you drafted him number 2 overall. This isn't about optics. This isn't about Ron Rivera. He's got to trust Chase Young. No, if Chase Young balls out, they'll pay him his freaking money. Because that's what they do, and that's what everyone does in the league. Trent Williams doesn't have to show up for anything again for the rest of his life except for games. And guess what? If he blocks like he blocks and does the stuff that he does, all the Trent Williams stuff, Kyle Shanahan will continue to start him at left tackle, and he will tell John Lynch and the rest of the front office, pay that man his money until Trent Williams decides he's had enough and he would like to go home. Because he's Trent Williams. He's earned that. Patrick Mahomes probably doesn't need to show up for anything. I do think quarterback's pretty helpful, but like Patrick Mahomes isn't working on stuff or doesn't need to work on stuff. He just got to keep being Patrick Mahomes. Guess what? He does, because he has a desire to get better, and he understands the importance of, within an 11-man unit, I am extremely important, and so I need to make sure that my teammates are on the same page with me. And with Chase especially, someone who wants to be a leader, you can't lead when you're not there. You don't get to show up at any job, any office, anything, any group of people when you haven't been around and be like, I'm in charge now. It's not how it works. That's respect, especially at the highest levels of performance, that is earned. And Chase Young hasn't earned that. And that's not me like putting that on Chase or putting that on his teammates. That is just being around the league and calling it the way it is, right? Chase doesn't have to prove anything to me, to you, to anybody listening, unless his teammates are listening. He has to go out and play. And him not being at OTAs is about him missing an opportunity to become a better football player. This is not basketball where NBA guys get together and after doing a lot of individual workouts and working on individual skills, get together and play a fair amount of one-on-one in the offseason. Or 5-on-5 in the offseason. Like, the runs that Chris Brickley puts on in New York City are pretty freaking good. They're not quite NBA games, but they're the best basketball that's being played on the planet outside of the NBA and maybe some like the La Liga in Spain. The organized games in the Spanish top tier, which is the second best league in the world, maybe are as good as the NBA pickup games that happen in the summer. That's not how football works. It's not how the NFL works. Chase Young doesn't have a chance to play football or anything resembling football in the offseason. He does a lot of individual work, which is required for his job. He can do a lot of really important stuff and needs to do a lot of really important stuff on his own. But eventually you have to play with and off of the guys next to you. And you have to play within a scheme that you will be able to execute better if you practice. This is your chance to practice. You are missing it. You are not good enough and don't have enough reps under your belt in the NFL to be missing opportunities to get better. So I'm not going to then turn this into a thing about humility or humbleness or whatever. Like, that's just football analysis. And I'm really, really comfortable leaving that right there. Frankly, I'm a little comfortable going further. talking about things like professionalism, talking about trust, talking about those things. Because I think those things are real. They just don't matter as much as being good at football. And Chase Young is passing up an opportunity to be better at football. And that's why it's a mistake. None of the other stuff, it all factors in. But that's icing. Cake, be good at football. And Chase Young has not been good enough. This is a chance for him to be better, and he is not there. And that seems like a gigantic mistake. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980. Always live as well on the free Odyssey app. You can call us 301-230-0980, taking your calls on Chase Young until the bottom of the hour. Again, 301-230-0980. Leave us a comment on YouTube as well, where we're streaming live at youtube.com/@theteam980.
Listen to the team.
The Hoffman Show, Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Taking your calls, 301-230-0980. Also, you can tweet me at Craig Hoffman. You can leave a YouTube comment as well on the live stream, youtube.com/@theteam980. Quick version of the take, in case you just tuned in. Chase Young, that's the storyline. He's not at the first day of OTAs today. By the way, neither is Montez Sweat. Neither is Charles Leno. Leno, I don't particularly care about. He probably feels like a much less, like, he kind of guy that'll be there tomorrow, had a personal thing today. Sweat's an interesting one to watch. And Logan and I talked about this more extensively on Take Command. specific to Sweat and Young. As long as Montez is there and in meetings, like, I'm pretty cool with that. I don't think he needs a ton of practice reps. He's been, unlike Chase, playing the last 4 years. Chase, there's a chance to have a practice level intensity and a spring practice level intensity that I think would be good for him, that then ramps up into the mini camp, ramps up into training camp, ramps up into preseason, and then ultimately into regular season speed. That would be great for Chase Young. As someone with a fitness background who's worked on a ton of rehabs, like, that's actually ideal. Hey, I've got a 6-month ramp, or let's see, what are we in, May? A 3-month ramp here that I can do actual football stuff and get mental reps, like, on the field at this stage of rehab. Like, that's ideal. And I know he's kind of post-rehab because he got back to playing last year, but I really do think, like, that gradual ramping up into the season, there's a reason why this stuff is set up this way. And for someone who hasn't played a lot the last couple of years, like, that's a giant opportunity that he's missing, and I just don't get why. 301-230-0980. I got a couple of calls rolling in. Let's get started with Scott in Silver Springs. Scott, you, sir, are on the Hoffman Show.
Hey, how you doing, man?
I'm good, Scott. Thanks for calling.
I agree. I agree with you. I don't understand, especially since he caught so much flack the first time he did this, and then after being injured, now, like you said, the opportunity to get reps and to get work in. I mean, I wonder if it just doesn't have something to do with them not picking up this 5th-year option, or, I mean, I have no idea. But I really like the guy. I'm a big fan of his. But this is just, I just don't understand.
And that's kind of my thing, Scott, is, like, let's say it does have something to pick up or have to do with picking up the 5th-year option. What is he getting out of it by not showing up?
I don't get
Right.
it. I don't get it. I mean, that would be even more of a feather in his cap if he was there working hard. I mean,
Yeah,
and especially
100%.
since he hasn't put up any numbers since his rookie year, and you can blame it on injury. But before he got injured his second year, he wasn't doing anything. He wasn't making any noise. So
100%.
I don't know.
Thanks, Scott, for the call. Appreciate it. You know, I was having this conversation with my wife earlier in a different context. But, like, sometimes if you get a complaint about, I'll use myself and as an example. When I was younger in my career, I didn't really like the role that I had at a previous radio station. And I started to really slack off and gave the absolute bare minimum. And I eventually got called into my boss's office, and he was basically like, fix it or you're out of here. And I was like 24 at the time, like young, early in my career. Professionalism wasn't at maximum levels yet. And I felt entitled to certain things because I thought I had done the work. And when on my timeline, I felt like I had deserved more and I saw opportunities go to other places, like I started to slide. I was like, fine, then I'll show up, I'll do my job, and I'll go home. And that wasn't enough. I needed to do more. I needed to be prepared. I needed to do not just a job, but I needed to do a good job. And I got some advice that is cliched advice, but I really took it to heart. And it's, if you want to get, like, the best way to get the job you want is to do the job you have. And I made it so my work was going to be so far beyond reproach that if I got passed over again for opportunities, then I could, withstanding, go to my boss and be like, yo, what the hell? Like, what do you want from me? I'm doing such a good job. Everyone, you've said I'm doing a good job. What more do you want? And ultimately, I got some more opportunities, but also I got to a point where I realized that wasn't going to be good enough, and I left because I got a better opportunity because someone else noticed my work. And so the reason I tell that story is if you're Chase Young and you're mad because you think you deserve that 5th-year option because of whatever reasons that he may have, well, you didn't get it, and there's only one way for you to get the next contract, which is to work for it. And I'm not saying Chase is sitting on his couch, eating potato chips, doing no work. For all I know, he's doing extremely intense and valuable individual work on his own. But I just have a hard time seeing how that individual work is as valuable to him as a football player when his individual skills and traits are not really what the question is. It's how well can you be a part of the team on and off the field. By not showing up to training or to OTAs, you're not helping your cause at all. You're not getting the job that you want by doing the job that you have. 301-230-0980. Let's go to Blaine. Blaine, thanks for calling. You're on the Hoffman Show.
Hey, what do you say, Craig? How's it going, buddy?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Thanks for calling in.
Hey, no problem, man. Yeah, I'm with you on the Chase deal, man. It doesn't make much sense to me why you wouldn't show up. You know, I mean, you're supposed to be a leader. That's the whole thing. You know, I mean, he's not going to be there. He's not going to be ready to bang. He's not going to be ready to do anything like that. But he should be there to just to do the rah-rah thing, man. I mean, he's something he's pretty good at.
No, Blaine, I appreciate the call. And if I'm talking to the right Blaine, I also appreciate all the YouTube comments. Much appreciated, man. Thank you.
Hey, dude, that's no problem. I'm here to support you, brother.
I appreciate it.
You do a fine, fantastic job, man. And you educate the crap out of me. So
Thank
at
you,
least
Blaine.
I can do it by getting in there and helping you monetize and help you get a good thing going, man.
I appreciate it, Blaine. Thank you. So, like, to Blaine's point, you know, the other thing about OTAs is you don't have to just show up and practice. Like, if you're at a stage where you're still working some things out and you're like, hey, I'm not going to participate in team drills today, you can go through individuals. You can go through the meetings. You don't even have to go through the individuals. Like, Daron Payne last year did very limited work, but he was there, right? He was there because it was good for him, and it helped him have the best season of his career. I'd be fascinated to ask Daron Payne tomorrow when the media gets out there, hey, man, like, how much did showing up to OTAs last year, even though you were a limited participant, help you get set for the season? And my guess is he'd say, like, it definitely helped. Like, we practice for a reason. So if you're Chase Young and you're trying to have the kind of year that Daron Payne just did, best year of your career, statistical excellence, a part of a winning team in terms of at least their side of the ball, defensively, like, they were pretty freaking good last year. Like, I just, it doesn't make sense. And the idea that, oh, it's voluntary. He doesn't have to. Okay. You don't have to. But at the end of the day, like, you do have to produce. And if your employer is offering you a resource to help you produce and you don't take it, you damn well better produce. And if you don't, they're going to find someone else. And that's the reality that Chase Young is staring down. Is his employer is offering a way for him to be better at his job. It's not mandatory. He doesn't have to do it. But hey, here's a resource. In our at work portal, you can take this class to help with XYZ skill. No, you can show up to practice. We'll help you get better. And it'll probably help us win games. And if you produce, like, it'll get you paid. And Chase is like, yeah, I'm good. I'm going to do it on my own. Okay. Seems like a bad decision, but we'll find out in the fall when he either balls out or doesn't. Or I open with this and I'll close with this on this topic for now before Law Murray joins us to talk some hoops. Or he shows up tomorrow and we just wasted half an hour. If he shows up tomorrow and does the full rest of the practices, misses 0 more, 1 more, like, is that a missed opportunity? Yes. Is it 1%? Probably. Maybe not even. Like, he can make up the work, like, whatever. If he misses all of it and he misses stacking the one good day on top of another good day on top of another good day, then he's behind. Then I think it's a mistake, and I think you will see that in the fall. If not, if it's just one day, chances are doesn't really make that much of a difference. So before we fully empty the clip, before we fully go, this guy's lost his mind, let's at the very least see if he shows up tomorrow. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980. Always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Appreciate the calls. When we get back, Law Murray from The Athletic talking hoops. Yikes. Lakers swept. We're talking about it next. Right now, though, our pleasure to welcome back to the show our guy Law Murray, NBA writer from The Athletic. Covers the Clippers full-time, but doing a lot of other stuff during the NBA playoffs. We had Law on a couple weeks ago. It was great. Excited to have him back on the show talking some hoop. Law, what's up, man? How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me back.
Absolutely. Our pleasure. So, not all sweeps are created the same. This was a bunch of close games, and ultimately the Nuggets win all 4 of them. But these were close games. If you're the Lakers and you're looking back, what do you think the biggest missed opportunities are during this 4-game sweep?
It really comes down to situational basketball. In all 4 of these games, you could either say that the Lakers did not have the right mentality to start the game, or they did not do what they needed to do to stop bleeding when they had double-digit leads. And the latter was the case last night, and that was also the case in Game 2. I mean, Game 2, they had the gift of Jamal Murray being terrible to start that game. He missed 12 of his first 15 shots. The Lakers were up, I believe, 12 in the third quarter. And once Jamal started making shots in Game 2, we're down 2-0. Game 4 last night, the Lakers had the gift of a 15-point lead, and Jokic was 1 foul away from foul trouble, and Jamal Murray was having his quietest game of the series overall. But LeBron takes 9 minutes to catch his breath from not scoring. I mean, dude had literally the best half of scoring in the playoffs in his entire career, and no one picked up the slack for him. No one kept the momentum going at home facing elimination. So their double-digit leads got eaten up. And the way they started Game 1, being down 21, the way they started Game 3 with Jamal Murray going off for 30 in that first half, they just didn't have it. Now, all these games were close down the stretch, whether the Lakers blew a lead or had to make a comeback. And even then, the Nuggets knew who they were down the stretch. They outplayed them. And so I don't even want to put too much on the Lakers and everything about how these games ended. You got to give all the credit for the Nuggets being persistent, understanding who they are, and executing at such a high level. But you open that door by not taking care of the things that built up to the end of those games. And that's where, if you're the Lakers, you're sick about how all 4 of those games ended.
I love the way you put that. The Nuggets know who they are. How much of this can you chalk up to the Lakers not really having any idea? Because this is a team that was put together largely at the trade deadline. LeBron misses, I think it was 4 weeks with the foot injury. And then, you got all these different rotations in the playoffs, different matchups, different things that Darvin Ham is tinkering with. And it just, he tinkered right down to the end. You had guys starting Game 3 that coach's decision DNP in Game 4 in Jared Vanderbilt's case. So how much of this is the Lakers not really understanding who they are because they just didn't have the time with the way this team was constructed?
Well, they didn't have the time, but they also gave themselves more time with how they finished this season. And the ironic thing is they understood how to play with LeBron James out of the lineup. I mean, LeBron James' injury was similar to Kevin Durant's injury with Phoenix. I mean, Kevin Durant entered this postseason with only 8 games played with the Phoenix Suns overall. And LeBron, so he gets hurt pretty early after the trade deadline. Basically, after the All-Star break, he gets hurt in that Sunday afterwards. So he had only played 2 games, really 3 games, with the new guys, right? And so he comes back, and they're still trying to make that push to get over 500, make the playoffs. So LeBron winds up coming back, and he only plays 8 games after his long layoff. That's 10 games, not 10, 13, 8 plus 3, that's 11 games total with all the guys that they had traded for. It's a new team that LeBron came back to. The good news is that team was good enough to get them into the play-in. They survived the play-in. They never faced elimination against the number 2 seed in the West, Memphis Grizzlies. They never faced elimination against the number 6 seed, but the defending NBA champion Golden State Warriors. The Nuggets series was the first time that they faced a kind of adversity where it's like, okay, you're facing elimination. And I got to say, like, I think the Lakers actually handled a lot of things pretty well. But when it relates to LeBron, there's how LeBron does things and how his team might have done things if LeBron wasn't there. And you have to kind of look, you can't have it both ways, you know. So we can say, hey, look, this team just got together. Of course, they were going to break down, but you also got to say everybody on that team in that rotation that Darvin Ham got to go to, they all gave the Lakers a chance to get to this point, and they just fell to a team that, forget this year, that team has been building a core for 5 years.
Yeah, 100%. Law Murray is our guest from The Athletic, NBA writer. And that's the thing. Like, so much of this is, you know, the answer to the question is, hey, the Nuggets are awesome. and you know, they're the number 1 seed for a reason. Obviously, we will have time to talk about them, and will even here in a couple minutes. But I want to do a couple more Lakers things real quick as they enter their offseason. And to me, Law, the biggest question, the way to frame the question in terms of their future is, do they need to upgrade above Anthony Davis and LeBron James or below them? Meaning, do they need to find a way to get someone who is on their level or perhaps even better than Anthony Davis, which is, you know, 10 guys on the planet maybe? Or is this a good enough top 2 and they just need to figure out the depth pieces to go around them and use this year as kind of a template of, okay, this is good, but we need that next level to be able to beat a team like the Nuggets?
Well, I think they learned from the Russell Westbrook experience, both trading for him and trying to fit him in, that they are better served figuring out the role players outside of LeBron and Anthony Davis than trying to go for a third star who would, at the same time, you're thinking, okay, that third star is going to pick things up when LeBron and AD have their inevitable injuries. But everyone misses the point with third stars in today's NBA. That third star has to be available and fit those guys both when those other guys are out, the main stars, and they have to fit in when all those guys are playing together. And that's hard. LeBron and AD are really good players and a really good tandem, but they're not perfect. And one of the reasons they're not perfect, besides the availability concerns, is that both of them, on some level, they need the ball, and they're not that threatening as far as shooting. So who's your ideal third star? You're thinking Kyrie Irving. Well, Kyrie Irving is one of the most unreliable dudes in the entire league. Like, you're thinking Kyrie Irving is going to be consistently available, both from a health standpoint and an intangible standpoint. That's going to be the concern. Like, I feel like LeBron really wants to play with Kyrie, a guy who can shoot, a guy who would make sense as an offensive piece with those guys, but also a guy who defensively, and you're just concerned with how you build a team around those other guys, Kyrie, LeBron, AD. You still need wings. You still need guys who can come off the bench. You still need defenders, and that's going to hurt you. So it probably is easier in this NBA to break up the third star ideology into a more complete team. Give yourselves more chances to get guys that contribute who aren't a star level, but absolutely could contribute to a fuller rotation. That's what won the Lakers a championship in 2020. That's what got the Lakers into the playoffs and give them a chance to be contenders this year. And if they go for another star this offseason, then it means that they didn't learn their lesson at all.
Yeah, and also it's how the team that just smashed them in 4 games is built. They've got Michael Porter Jr., they've got KCP, they've got all these different guys that are interchangeable, or, you know, at least in terms of roles on any given night, how much you expect from them. Speaking of, in terms of what's reasonable to expect from someone, there was a giant debate, and which I actually thought was interesting on some levels. Some way it was like TV, shticky, you know, morning TV type of stuff. But the debate on Get Up this morning about Anthony Davis and what is reasonable to expect from him. And Zach Lowe was like, look, this dude's the best defender on the court every single game. And a lot of people choose to ignore that. And then there's the inconsistency on the offensive end that a lot of other folks have pointed out. in your eyes, or through your eyes, do you think it is reasonable to expect more from Anthony Davis, or is this, version of him, which still very productive, somewhere between 20 and 40 points, somewhere between 12 and 18 rebounds, 3 blocks, excellent defense, like, is that just who he is going to be? And if you want more from him offensively, you are wanting something that doesn't exist.
Yeah, I think it's more of the latter. This will be Anthony Davis' first offseason as a 30-year-old. It gets harder, not easier at this point. And so Anthony Davis is a great player, but he's about to enter year 12. Like, he pretty much is what he is. And that player is a great player, but it's also a player who's going to more than likely miss 20 games. That's just the ballpark. I mean, going back to New Orleans, Anthony has missed at least 20 games every season. Forget 20. I mean, Anthony's missed at least 25 games every single season, except for the year the Lakers won the chip in the bubble. And that year, I got to give Anthony Davis credit because 80% of the regular season was spoken for at the time of the pandemic suspending that regular season in the NBA. But the bubble run that Anthony Davis went on, it legitimately was the best that AD has ever played on any level in any version of a season. Like, he was shooting threes, he was dominating inside, he was dominating defensively. He also got to dominate next to 2 legitimate centers in JaVale McGee and Dwight Howard, which is something that AD has always said, give me another big. And this series showed why Anthony Davis would love to play with another center, a legitimate center that allows Anthony Davis to basically to play free safety as a defender and roam and help, and then take that pressure off so that offensively he can take advantage of typically smaller guys. This series showed it, and so it gets harder. I think that's the biggest. If I'm the Lakers front office, and I'm super glad that I'm not, that's the thing that I'm looking at. Like, who are your bigs around AD? Because AD clearly needs some help. When they got Russell Westbrook, they built a team with Russ, AD, and LeBron that we all talked about the shooters. We didn't talk enough about how that team had DeAndre Jordan playing starter minutes for the first 2 months of that season while they still had a chance to do something in the standings. It was irresponsible team building on so many levels. It wasn't just Russ. It was the absolute and crazy way they built that team.
Yeah.
Darvin Ham came from Milwaukee. You know why Giannis Antetokounmpo is so good and that Milwaukee defense is so good? It's because Giannis can do Giannis stuff while having the stability of one of the biggest stretch fives in the league in Brook Lopez. And I really feel like Darvin would love to have a center who could do that, but it's hard to find that kind of player, especially if you're already building a team around AD and LeBron. So it's tough to expect any more from Anthony Davis than what you've seen this year and what you've seen in the previous couple years.
Law Murray, NBA writer for The Athletic, with us here on the Hoffman Show on the Team 980. One of the guys they do have the option of bringing back is Rui Hachimura. He will be a restricted free agent if they extend him. But I believe I was reading earlier today, I read a lot of numbers, but I think it's a $7.7 million qualifying offer. He will obviously get a richer contract than that, but that is the immediate cap hold that they'll deal with as they navigate their summer. And really the question I have, Law, is who is Rui Hachimura? Because the dude that played in the playoffs was not the dude that we saw here in Washington for many years. And I am still willing to bet that the dude we saw in Washington is much closer to who Rui is. But after seeing him in these high-pressure situations playing with LeBron and AD, who do you think Rui Hachimura is the next 4 years of what his contract will be?
Well, he also took a step forward in terms of what the Lakers saw from him in the regular season, too. There was a part of the regular season where Rui was out the rotation. Rui, when LeBron came back, Rui was temporarily out of the rotation with the Lakers. I mean, Rui didn't break 30% shooting threes as a Laker. He wasn't rebounding. He wasn't making the extra plays. He's not a defensive playmaker. In the playoffs, the biggest thing that Rui did that was a step forward was that three-point shooting. He got so comfortable shooting the three and getting hot consistently And he's a good finisher. Like, he's a guy, if he has a straight line, he's going to finish. And I think offensively, his shot prep, that is a big swing for whether Rui is going to be effective or not. And that's a gamble, but I think Rui really likes basketball. I think Rui wants to be good, and I think Rui understands that getting that shot together. And I think even in Washington, the thing that I like the most about Rui is his mid-range game. Like, he's comfortable getting to certain spots. Now it's up to him as a guy who is a little older than a lot of people think he is. He's 25 already, so it's not like he has that much ceiling left to discover. Like, he's pretty close to what he's going to be as well. And even if he gets to be a guy who can shoot the three ball like he did in the postseason, Rui's kind of limited. He's not a guy, like, he's a bigger body, but he's a little small to be asking him to guard the centers. And he's not the quickest or the most reliable on the perimeter as far as his feet. So if you bring Rui back as a high dollar player, you're betting on him being a guy who can consistently hit shots and consistently get to his spots to score. That's where it's a gamble. That's where I think Washington was like, it's not worth it. Let's get someone or get anything for him, even if it's someone like Kendrick Nunn in a second. And for the Lakers, it's like, if you value Rui Hachimura, that's great, but it's not enough for the other things that they're going to need.
Right. All right. The Nuggets deserve some love, so let's give them some love on the way out here.
Yeah, they do.
Lon Murray's with us from The Athletic here on the Team 980. This team has been so close. They obviously had Murray's devastating knee injury a couple years ago, and it really feels like they're finally back to what they were then with Aaron Gordon in the fold. But what is it that made this team different? Is it Murray re-achieving that level? Is it some of the more ancillary pieces, the KCPs obviously traded from here in Washington? Why was this Nuggets team the one that broke through?
They were the team that was – it all came together this year. I mean, last year you had Jamal on the end of his ACL recovery. People were clamoring for him to come back. If he would have came back, it would have been ugly. It just would have been. Like, it's not just the physical part of the ACL recovery, it's the mental part. And I think Jamal was ready physically before he was ready mentally. The mental toughness that Jamal Murray showed throughout this year, and especially in these playoffs, it shows another level of basketball player. And then Michael Porter Jr., he's another guy who missed significant time with a scary injury. Like, his back injury is not like other guys' back injuries because he was a late lottery pick because of that back injury. The Nuggets redshirted Michael Porter Jr. because of that back injury. And then after he gets his money, he has to undergo another procedure. I saw a different version of Michael Porter Jr. in these playoffs. And I saw a guy who's not just shot hunting all the time and calling out his star teammates for not getting any shots. I saw a player who's making the extra pass, making the extra defensive effort. So when guys have basketball taken away from them and they come back, it's the physical part of it is one thing, but it's also the mental and emotional readiness that comes with joining a team that can do something special like Denver has. They knew that Nikola Jokic without those guys was an MVP player, and Nikola got better with those guys. And then to your point, to bring in guys like Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Bruce Brown, I mean, look, they had Gary Harris once upon a time. I remember watching Gary Harris in the bubble in 2020, and Gary Harris was coming back from an injury. Gary's durability was always his biggest issue, but when that dude was on the floor, he was such a great fit as a 3-and-D guard. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope probably doesn't have the same ceiling as Gary Harris did. KCP's a little further on in his career at this point than Gary was back in 2020. But KCP's been a reliable. What they learned about KCP in the bubble was that dude can contribute to a championship team. He's done it. That experience means a lot more, especially when you spend some time in Washington, spend some time out the playoffs, and got to come back to a team that can do something. KCP is a better version of himself than he was even when he was with the Lakers. And then Bruce Brown's been around even as a guy who is really in his early part of his NBA career. They're a complete team. And you don't get to be a complete team until you've had some adversity, until you've had some guys come and who are a little hungrier than they might have been if they had just seen success all their NBA careers. I think that stuff matters, man, and that's why Denver, it is their time right now. But it's not something that comes overnight. It came over years. I said earlier in this interview, this has been like a 5-year project for the Nuggets because that's how many years they've been in the playoffs. And you're seeing them peak at a time when a lot of teams, Philadelphia 76ers, for instance, they kind of tend to hit a wall and get an identity crisis.
No doubt. And I'll say this about KCP. He is such a great example of what happens when you put a guy in the right box. Like, he was asked to do way too much in Washington, and I couldn't stand watching that dude play here. But you watch him with the Lakers a couple years ago, you watch him with the Nuggets now, and it is like what Pop is so great at and was for so many years in San Antonio. This is your job. This is your job. And by the way, when I say this is your job, this other thing is not your job. And KCP is such a perfect fit there, along with all the other guys that you said. And I think it's just a good reminder that, like, players, for most of them, unless you're Nikola Jokic or prime LeBron James, et cetera, like, your fit matters a ton. And I think you've laid that out really well. Both what didn't go well for the Lakers and the Nuggets.
I gotta add one more, guys. Just Aaron Gordon real quick. He could have been an all-star this year. I talked to him about that. He really wanted that. This dude is a former top 5 pick. And look at how his game is now versus how his game was perceived when he was competing in dunk contests with Zach LaVine when Aaron was with the Magic. Like, they didn't have that guy in the bubble. And by the time they got that guy, they had to wait for Jamal to get healthy and wait for Michael Porter Jr. to get healthy. Now you're seeing a different version of that team. Like, the guy playing Aaron's spot before was guys like Paul Millsap and Jeremy Grant. Like, that matters as well.
100%. Very, very well said. Law Murray, everybody, from The Athletic, NBA writer, doing a great job covering the playoffs for them. Law, appreciate it, and hopefully we'll get to talk to you either during the finals or right after as we head into the offseason.
Hey, thank you so much. Y'all enjoy yourselves this week.
Appreciate that. Law Murray, everybody, with us here on The Hoffman Show. When we get back, AJ Perez from the NFL owners' meetings. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. It is 5 o'clock. If you're not new to the show, you know what time it is. If you are new to the show, every single day, 5 o'clock, we talk about the day's top story with an expert. Today, the NFL owners' meetings wrapped in Eagan, Minnesota, and so let's go live there right now.
Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not my beat.
That guy that expert is AJ Perez, our guy from Front Office Sports. AJ, what's up, man?
Not much. It's kind of everything's been torn down here. I'm next to where Dale was speaking about 3 hours ago. So.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's always the fun time during the events when everybody goes home, and if your flight's a little later, you're just like, oh, cool. You guys aren't waiting for me to leave, huh? You're just tearing everything down right now, and I'll stare at your naked walls.
Pretty much, yeah. They're actually, the hotel staff here has been great. You know, we just kind of wander around for it was only 2 days this time, only a day and a half. So they kind of they see us wandering the halls, going up and downstairs, trying to talk to owners and everybody else. So. This was a pretty chill one compared to the last couple.
Yeah, so we'll get into the substance of the latest everything in the moment. But first, you always have such great stories from these things. Like, what's your favorite, hanging out in the lobby, trying to talk to someone, see these two people talking to each other, whatever that story is from this owners' meetings that you can tell on the radio. What's your favorite lobby story from this go-around?
I actually talked to David Tepper for the first time. So, very brief conversation. He corrected me that he's not a private equity. I'm like, all right, hedge fund manager. I'm like, so, yeah, that was the first thing. There's always owners that you talk to, try to talk to a couple new ones at every single meeting and try to get a rapport going. So, yeah, that's one. I don't know if we're going to become friends or anything, but that was a good intro.
There you go. Now you know that he's a hedge fund guy, not a private equity guy, which just, is so much better. All right, Commander sale-wise, we knew going in there was not going to be a final vote. What ultimately, whether it's from Goodell, from Irsay, from Jerry Jones, what did we learn about where this sale is and what's holding it up at this point in the process over these last 36 to 48 hours?
I think if you parse the words from Irsay and the others, it's really just the size of the group. We're going to have 12, maybe up to 17, who knows. Limited partners. And really, Josh Harris can have up to 24 limited partners if you wanted to under the NFL Constitution and bylaws. So there's really nothing stopping it. But the number of names that does add time to it. There's whether there's issues with other issues besides that, the way it's structured. That's less of an issue. I think it's just the time it's going to take to go through everybody. And really, it's only been 12 days since it went final. They were, as I reported before, they were doing a lot more advanced work on Josh Harris's proposal, even, which doesn't usually really start until the application goes in, but they did some more advanced work than they usually do over the last couple months. So they're a little far ahead of the game, but it kind of cancels out because really, it is a big group, and we were talking about over $6 billion. So this is this is going to be the way I think a lot of future NFL sales are going to be going if they don't make some changes to either 30% rule for liquidity, which Josh Harris for this purchase is $1.8 billion about, or private equity coming in and being part of ownership group and the bankrolling's part of it. So that's this is the way it's going to go. And it's like I'm also covering the Senator sale up in Canada, and they're having issues there. That's a $1 billion sale, and you got Apostolopoulos as part of that too, and he's still in the mix there.
Yeah, I think the lesson here is just avoid Canadian Stephen A, and then your sale will go fine. All due respect to Canadian Stephen A.
I don't know. Brian Davis may have something to say on that.
Yeah, I'm gonna leave him alone for today. That's what I decided. I thought about talking about that story. You know what? Maybe we'll circle back to it. Let's see how we're doing on time because I want to know about the fish market. So when the Irsays and the Joneses and the Goodells talk about this stuff, you think that we're now down to just kind of a vetting process. What were, as far as we know, the structural issues, and how did those ultimately get resolved?
Yeah, that's a good question. My sources have been telling me it's the size of the deal, it's the number of limited partners, it complies with everything. There could be arguments over does it really comply? One owner who's on the finance committee could have one view on it, another owner could have another. But, Josh Harris has allies on this committee. Robert Kraft is on there. Got Rooney's on there. I talked to Rooney a little bit after today. He's selling, and we learned here, one of the things we learned here was that Josh Harris and David Blitzer, who was also part of the ownership group, they're selling their 5% stake in the Steelers. That process has started, and it'll conclude. And, it has to conclude by the time, not necessarily when the vote happens, but within a few days, because, for the team to get transferred officially to Josh Harris, he needs to divest that 5% in the Steelers.
Right. Yeah, that's something that we knew had to happen, but now, obviously the processing and timing of those is pretty important. So Jim Irsay had said, maybe we'll call a special meeting after July 4th. What do you know about that timeline? Is that just Irsay spitballing something random, or do you think like they talked about that in a meeting and he just said it out loud?
No, they did talk about it.
Okay.
Yeah. So from what I understand is the goal is by July 4th to have a date set, on or around July 4th. So that would probably make it late July, early August, as I reported yesterday. So the special, which is going to be kind of like this is basically the same timing as the Broncos sale. They came in, flew into Minnesota, actually from Mall of America, not where we're here next to the Vikings facility. They all flew in, all the owners. It took a few minutes. Yeah, they voted them, but they approved. They approved the Rob Walton deal for the Broncos. It's going to be the same thing here. They're going to fly in. It'll be done. They don't want any questions to be asked during this, so they want to have the owners fully briefed. That's on the finance committee. Once they're comfortable with it, they'll brief the owners and set the date, and then there'll be might be some questions. The 3 or 4 weeks it'll take before the date's set, and they fly in wherever they're going to fly into. I'm not sure where yet. But yeah, they don't want. They just want show up and vote. That's it. There could also be a second vote. Would be for Roger Goodell extension, which wasn't finalized here, but it's getting closer to. So there could be 2 different things that will be on the agenda for that special meeting.
AJ Perez with us from Front Office Sports here on the Hoffman Show. So there was talk, I think it was the Post who reported that this was a possibility of some kind of like conditional approval, and perhaps that could free up Harris to be a little bit more involved on some level here as opposed to this team going through the rest of the offseason without ownership, and there's obvious limitations there. Is there still talk of anything like that happening? And what is Harris allowed to do right now, if anything, around this team?
Yeah, well, yeah, he can't do anything. I think I know I've talked about it before. Yeah, there's basically no contact. And Magic Johnson can go talk to governors like he did in Maryland. He could do everything but contact. Really, there's a little contact, but none of the contact with the team can be about doing any kind of hiring, firing, any kind of coaching decisions or anything like that. It's totally forbidden. The conditional approval, I think, would only come into play if for some reason we get to September and we get close to the start of, or late August, start of the season, and there still hasn't been a special meeting for approval. That's when I think the conditional approval could possibly come into play, because they really, Dan Snyder was checked out. I mean, there's really, this is a rudderless team at the moment. I think obviously Jason Wright, Martin Mayhew are in place, and they're running the show. But it's gonna, you also like to have an owner to kind of weigh in, since it's going to be Josh Harris's money pretty soon. He's going to be spending a lot of money on fan experience and everything else. So they don't want to go into this. NFL doesn't want to go into the season. I'm sure Josh Harris doesn't either. I know the Commanders fans don't. They don't want to enter the season with just kind of in limbo. So I could see conditional approval being applied just to get around the NFL rule about no contact until the sale is final.
So my good buddy Michael Phillips from the Richmond Times-Dispatch was saying earlier this week that he feels like this is all kind of ridiculous because, Snyder's charge, if you will, was to find a buyer. He has. They've agreed upon a deal, and now you have this gigantic waiting period where, for instance, in the leaked prospectus to ESPN, Josh Harris lays out like $100 million that he wants to invest fairly immediately into the team. He can't do that. Yeah. And if he could do that now, some of that stuff might be ready for the start of the season in terms of stadium upgrades and things like that. He can't do that. Is there validity to that argument that there is a way the NFL could get this done faster, or is this just kind of the way business needs to be done so that there aren't any massive issues down the road?
You just hit on like a good split among the owners. I think they want a lot of traditionalists here. I mean, Irsay is one of them. They want to go by how every other sale has gone. Granted, a lot of them have inherited their teams, so they don't have to worry about any of this. A lot of the people who are here didn't go through any ownership. There's a lot of there's so much, these teams get handed down so much that they've never been through it themselves, so they kind of don't get how frustrated the fans are when a process takes this long. And but this is also on Snyder. He did not finalize the deal until earlier this month, so that was that's a major part of it. And we knew for several weeks that Harris was the only one capable of buying the team, or not capable, they're not capable, but wanted to buy the team and had the capability to buy the team. That's basically it. So it's like I think this process could like Michael said, could move faster. It certainly could. It probably should. But they also don't want to set anything up where there's any questions with debt load and everything else, because they don't. The last thing the NFL wants is an owner to come in and not spend money. And we kind of saw it with Dan Snyder. We saw the shape that how beautiful the complex is for the Vikings. And looking at Ashburn, it's like wow. It's there's just so much disparity between. And Josh Harris is paying over $6 billion for it. He needs to spend so much money, including a new stadium, on getting this team up on par with a team in Minnesota, for example.
Well, that's the thing is like he's ready to. He can't. And like that to me is like the frustrating thing. And I also get like, hey, look, if they had done more due diligence on Dan Snyder in 1999, they wouldn't be in this mess because he wouldn't have gotten the team. They definitely messed that up. They were in a rush to get him through because they were tired of Jack Kent Cook's estate having it. If they hadn't, they probably have their first $1 billion sale and it goes to Fred Smith. Instead, Smith ultimately becomes a minority investor. We all know how that played out. I understand the diligence. It's just like the things you're trying to protect against are embodied in the guy that's leaving, not the guy that's coming. And you would hope that there was enough wiggle room and intelligence in the room to fix that. And I guess that was kind of my question is like, is that something that there's even any wiggle room for? Because also, like I've mentioned this on the show at this point a lot of times, my parents just sold their small business down in South Carolina that they ran for 25 years and owned for 25 years. And that took forever. And it's a small business that definitely did not make $6 billion in terms of the sale. And if it did, Mom and Dad, I have questions and I also have a couple of requests. But like I know these things take time. It just feels like there is not motion happening that should or could be for reasons that it just are completely unnecessary. That wasn't really a question. It was a rant, but you get my gist.
It is also, these NFL owners who are on the finance committee like Kraft and the others, like, they're on other committees. They have other businesses. They have other, they have their teams to run. So you really kind of have to question how much time they're actually spending on this because, with them coming together here, and they had a little meeting about a couple weeks ago, somewhere on Zoom, I think. So it's like how quickly can you go through a deal? It's complex because of the price and the limited partners. How much time do they have to spend on this? How much time have they spent on it? And it's kind of like that's one of the issues. It's like, and we don't. While the vetting process is happening at the NFL front office, and they may have hired firms that speed it up, it really comes down to the finance committee. Because they have to submit their recommendation, they have to set the date, and until they do that, and how fast they do it, and if someone had the ability, I don't know if Roger Goodell does, but because these are his bosses, but if they said, hey, stay here in Minnesota, I don't want you guys to leave until you guys are happy with it, everything's been answered, that could have very well happened, but they didn't. This is not because it's been pushed off another several weeks. So I think there's so much part of it. I think there's really nothing. There's no red flag. They reported that weeks ago. There's nothing in this deal that should give anybody pause, either the fans or the owners. But this is the way it goes. This is they do take their time, and they do have they're going to follow what they did before, and it's a kind of a flawed process at this point.
I'm going to say something I never say, AJ. Hire more lawyers. Get this thing done. Please, for the love of all of our sanity and the good of the franchise and the league. All right, AJ Perez with us, Front Office Sports. Of course, you can read him at frontofficesports.com. Follow him on Twitter at @AJPerez, frequent guest here on the Team 980. So I know Goodell was asked again about the Mary Jo White report. What do we know about that in terms of timing, in terms of, what deal may or may not have been reached with Dan to get this thing across the finish line after that ESPN report a couple of weeks ago? What's the latest there?
My report seems to still stand from a couple weeks ago, where there's still, there's been discussions whether it's going to go this way or not. Is like a December timetable. I would be later because they don't they don't want to release it now. Yes, that's one option. That's not. I'm not saying they're going to go that way, but that was one option. And it's just because they don't want to ruin the honeymoon period for Josh Harris and his group coming in. They don't want to have an instant reminder that Josh, hey, remember Dan Snyder? He was on the team for 24 years.
AJ, let me ask you a question. Do you think that that's smart, or do you think the way I'm thinking, this is immediate reaction, that is one of the dumbest things that I've ever heard? Because all that does is keep the door open as opposed to slamming it shut.
Yeah, I would. I'm a reporter, man. I would like to have it now. I mean, I know it's going to be, especially from what I've heard about it, there's a lot of new stuff in it. And I think that's part of the math here. It's like it's not going to be the Wilkinson a few paragraphs. It's going to be a thorough report. At least that's what we've been promised. And the stuff I know that and Mary Jo White went deep into both the toxic workplace. Toxic workplace, pay disparity. Even I'm hearing, and even in it's a lot of the stuff that's actually now part of the Attorney General investigation from New York and California that was announced a couple of weeks back. So this is. So there's always that, and there's always also is like they also the other part of the timing is holding off to see if the federal investigation is going to do what they're going to do. If there's some kind of either lawsuit or maybe an indictment, who knows? No idea. Coming down before that, because the league doesn't like to act before an open investigation. At least usually we're talking about the personal conduct policy when players get in trouble, but that applies to everything. They don't want to get out ahead of a active investigation by law enforcement. So that's kind of another part of why the later in the year would seem to that has some chatter at the NFL front office about, but I don't think there's any decisions. Goodell is always saying it's up to Mary Jo White. So I guess we shall see.
Yeah, the investigation part makes sense. If it's a PR thing that they don't want to ruin the honeymoon period when they could slam the door shut. One day, AJ, perhaps I will understand why PR people are so bad at PR. If that is the advice of the PR,
I don't think it's the PR. We're talking about lawyers and league executives. I think that's And so there's always questions of how much Goodell likely doesn't have a say in what's inside of it. But we saw him, he was the one the first time around that said no written report. So he does have a say. To say that he doesn't is not being totally honest. He does have there is some input. It's going to go to him first, and then he will release it. So that's the whole thing. Mary Jo White on her own time frame. I'm like, yeah, but you did hire her. So.
Right, exactly. You're her client. You hired her, so she does what you say ultimately. All right. I know that Darren Haynes asked Goodell about this. Megan Imbert has been and Melanie and the whole crew has been very adamant that they are scared of Snyder potentially suing them. And Goodell was asked today about that, the ability to kind of work some kind of agreement into the sale. We talk about indemnification. They talk about the protection Snyder wants, that there's not going to be any lawsuit towards any former employees. What was Goodell's response to all of that?
Yeah, he didn't really answer the question. I think it's he doesn't like talking about that. So it's, this is the thing. There was a memo circulated to current employees that cleared them to talk to Mary Jo White. Now there's some issues of whether that applies to the former employees, but I think Dan Snyder's literally checked out. Even though I'm with the former employees to be concerned about it. But it just would not. I mean, the league wants Snyder to go away. The last thing they want is for him to do it. Now he can do whatever, he could challenge it. We could go into court and we could fight over the NDAs and everything else. But I think no one wants to talk about that outcome. So especially here. But I think is that a possibility? Possibly. I hope maybe it's more a hope than my personal knowledge of what's going to happen. But I just hope that doesn't happen. I think everybody's ready for, including the former employees, are ready to move on without threat of any more litigation.
Yes, I agree with that. I don't think that's a huge risk, but I understand why they want the protection. Last thing I will ask you, non-Commanders category, but you cover obviously the business of sports, which includes media rights. And the main actual story that comes out of this meetings, as much time as we have spent talking about the Commander sale, is the Thursday night flex situation. And they're doing this because they want to make Amazon happier. They don't want duds in prime time late. However, there's the obvious downsides of fans who are actually planning to go to those games and the competitive disadvantages of playing on Thursday night, player safety issues, all of that. And my question to you, AJ, is if they basically didn't give in to what Amazon wanted here and they kept the status quo, would that actually hurt their ability to make money in the next TV contract? Because I tend to think with where the market is, with where live sports are, with where the NFL sits atop that hierarchy, the NFL will get every cent it wants, even if the product is terrible. And so they don't need to do this bad thing to their product and to their workforce. When you talk about the player safety side of it, they clearly think that they do. Am I crazy on this? Am I missing something here? Or is how does that dynamic play out?
It's just because I think Amazon's paying a lot of money for the Thursday night package, and last season's schedule was kind of, especially late in the season, wasn't great. And they're a new partner. And one thing the league doesn't want to do is, obviously they appreciate Fox, CBS, ESPN, and NBC, which has been with them for a long time. They also don't want to. They also want to put their best foot forward. And Jerry Jones talked about that yesterday, what they did back when Fox first got the NFL in the 90s, trying to really help them out. Now, this was moving the game from Sunday to Sunday night, not a big deal. It's been since '06. NBC's been able to benefit from that. ESPN gets that. It's this year as well. So moving from Sunday and Monday, not a big deal. Moving Sunday to Thursday, it's a much bigger thing. So they extended the window from 15 days, got voted down in March, to 28 days, and now it's only a one-season thing, kind of like the kickoff rule. It's just kind of like a one-season, I wouldn't say trial, but it doesn't have to be carryover for 2024 and beyond. So I think there's a lot of. Mara he was so upset yesterday again, and he was like, just look at what I said. They didn't say exact words, but look what I said. He pointed us to his comments from March, which he was not happy. And a lot of the destination teams aren't happy with it. Now, Jerry Jones is the exception. He said, he's like, only 7% of our fans have actually been to AT&T Stadium. But when you do that, it also, for the players, definitely, even though they push back they've been put data out the last couple of years. Thursday night football is not any more dangerous than Sundays. But it's also the fans who book flights, who, this is their one big family trip a year, or their father, son want to go to, travel, a couple time zones to watch their team play. Oh, it just got flexed. Now I guess they'll get their flight credits back and try to do something else. But then you got to sell your tickets if you can't go. It's a lot of. They don't want to create friction, and a lot of the owners feel that this is creating friction. And so this is why this is kind of like a compromise. Okay, we'll try it for a year, weeks 13 on. There's a lot of. There is actually one owner told me yesterday, just like have everything after week 10, just make everything TBD. Sunday, don't set the times, just make it, just have some flexibility that way. I mean, not scheduling everything in May. How about leaving some things open? You have like TBD for the last week of the season now, for week 17. Maybe extend that, further earlier in the season. So that's one way that's one idea. But I think we're gonna see how it works. And they don't flex a lot. I mean, it doesn't get utilized as much as we talk about it and how controversial it is. This doesn't, the league is still kind of hesitant to do it. But they do want to give that ability to Amazon, since ESPN has it and NBC's had it for a long time.
Got it. AJ Perez, Front Office Sports. Make sure you read his work there on all of the NFL owners' meetings goings on. I know he's got a story up about Roger Goodell's extension, too. So there's definitely some topics we didn't get a chance to hit on. AJ, always appreciate you, sir. Yep. Safe travels back, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Talk to you later.
All right, that's AJ Perez, everybody, here on The Hoffman Show. When we get back, everything that's wrong with sports media distilled into 45 seconds. the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always alive as well on the free Odyssey app. Sometimes the internet gets me, and it's not even the internet. I'm gonna start that over, right? Sometimes the things that happen on TV get me. Sometimes the talking heads actually break through my ability to ignore much of the nonsense that is sports television, sports radio. And look, I'm not immune to it. I've certainly said things I think that I look back on, I was like, that was a dumb take. It happens to all of us. But there's a general obtuseness to specifically basketball commentary. But I think a lot of sports commentary in the modern era, and I'm going to call it the post-Michael Jordan era, which coincides with the sports radio era and ultimately the sports television era, the embrace debate era, that is so oversimplified and so just mind-numbingly stupid that it makes watching sports and consuming sports far less enjoyable. And the whole reason we watch this stuff and consume this stuff is because it's fun. It's fun to watch the absolute best at something that we all can do. We can all go play basketball. Many of us have for years, for our entire lives. We love the game. We love the sport. And these athletes go play it at a level that we are just incapable of as regular human beings. And we get to go marvel at that. And we watch them compete. And the fun is the competition. And the fun is even the drama that surrounds it, the soap opera. Dan Le Batard has said for years, all sports is a giant male soap opera. And he's right. He's right. It's not just the winning and the losing. It's the drama and the storylines. It's the heroes. It's the villains. But we have gone so far in a winning an exact certain way is the only right way to do it direction with so much of the commentary that we've completely lost our way. And rarely have I seen it so brilliantly distilled into so much dense stupidity as what I'm about to play for you from Get Up on ESPN this morning. I watch Get Up regularly. I think they do a good job. I think they're good at sparking conversation and being thoughtful. I think Mike Greenberg obviously runs that show, although he was not there today. Does a good job of sparking conversation. He clearly has a lot of respect from a lot of really smart people who are very willing to go on that show, just as he did with Mike and Mike for years. Like he has been facilitating largely good and interesting sports conversation for years, albeit Mike is someone who very clearly understands ratings, and a lot of it has been about the Lakers, the Yankees, Duke basketball, and the other 5 brands that more people in America care about than anybody else. The Cowboys, of course. But rarely do you get such a pristine example of how dumb so much of the conversation around sports is than this. The first voice you'll hear is Zach Lowe. He is probably ESPN, if not the entire sports media's best basketball mind. He is exceptional. He is so good that he is a gigantic basketball nerd who talks about X's and O's and lineups and rotations, has broken through to be a featured part of ESPN's NBA programming, right up there with someone like a Stephen A. Smith, who is yelling about narratives all the time. Not to say Stephen A. doesn't know hoop, but the things they talk about are very, very different, and the way they talk is very, very different. And I think many basketball fans would much rather listen to Zach than Stephen A. I think sports fans at large, maybe a different story, which is why Stephen A. has his platform. That's a different discussion. Point is, Zach Lowe went from someone who was kind of a blogger type to someone who's on TV almost every day talking about the NBA during the season because he's so good at what he does, and his basketball opinions are so well respected. And yet this is what happened this morning when he tried to actually drop that knowledge on Get Up. I will tell you ahead of time, I'm going to play this 45 seconds uninterrupted. There is a chunk in the middle that I cut out. It doesn't change kind of what happened in the clip. And if you want the longer one, I tweeted it out earlier today at Craig Hoffman. But here's the exchange this morning on Get Up, starting with Zach Lowe. Dan Graziano was the host of the show, and Alan Hahn is the other analyst that you'll hear make just a ridiculous statement.
Every discussion about Anthony Davis and whether he's got the dog in him and whether he wants to ball enough should start. The headline should be, he has been the most dominant defensive player in the entire playoffs. Anthony Davis has never been, to his fault, I guess, a give me the ball, Hakeem Olajuwon post-up player. That's not who he is. And if you want to say you wish you were that kind of player and you wish you could do that every game, that's fair. Just acknowledge that for half the game, he's the most dominant presence on the floor. Just acknowledge it.
All right, how did that dominant presence get a win in the series?
Alan, I want to get...
They're in the conference finals. Why are we acting like they failed?
I want to get Windy in on this. Please. I don't want to ignore Windy. Bring some rational sense to this conversation.
Bring some rational sense to this conversation? Are you bleeping kidding me? Anthony, I have very rarely on this show wanted to be able to swear and just stick up every middle finger that I can, I guess I only have two of them, at the FCC than right now. Like, just screw off. Bring some rational sense to the conversation. He's literally the most rational person at the network. What are you talking about? Irrational is taking a team that was in 13th place for much of the year, made some incredible deadline moves, had their second best player, who, by the way, is only their second best player because he's damn near 40 years old and you're 20 in the league, got a foot injury that he wasn't even supposed to be able to come back from, that it took the LeBron James of foot doctors to get him ability to play in the playoffs. He missed all that time, and they made the conference finals. And then they lost 3 of 4 single-digit games. The other game they lost was by 11. And they do all of this to the number 1 seed with the guy who's been the MVP the last 2 years, Jamal Murray, who's regained a form that few playoff players have ever had. And they lose in a very competitive series, albeit a sweep. And you have the audacity to look at Zach Lowe, the smartest basketball person at your network, and say, hey, your acknowledgement that Anthony Davis is the best defensive player in the playoffs, and it did have a positive impact on the series. Get that out of here. Bring some rational thought. Bleep you. What are we doing? How can we possibly be this stupid?
Craig, you are riled.
What are we doing?
I don't think they meant to be so dismissive of Anthony
Then they should do better.
Defensive efforts. They might have misspoke. We don't know because it cut out real quick.
No, this is what they do. This is what too many people in this business do. And the problem is, Anthony, it then filters down to fans. And fans think that this is the standard. It's not. It's really, really hard to win an NBA championship. Only one team gets to do it per year. The Lakers, what they did this year, I understand LeBron James. Again, LeBron James and Anthony Davis, they are not pundits. I talked about this months ago, right? Punditry versus participation. If you actually have a say in the outcome, you should believe like championship or bust. I get it, because if LeBron James thinks like, oh, it's fine if I get to the conference finals, that's going to affect his performance. But I don't have any say, and neither does anybody that was on that Get Upset in what actually happens in the games. We can be objective. Objectively speaking, the Lakers had an incredible season. Their playoff run, it would be the talk of the league if the Heat weren't doing something somehow more spectacular, somehow more unexpected. Like, the Lakers took out a Grizzlies team that was supposed to be next in line. They took out the defending champion Warriors and did it by imposing their will defensively to the point that Klay Thompson had one of the worst shooting games of his life in a must-win game, in part because his rhythm was so jacked because of how good the Lakers were defensively all series long. And then they go up against the best team probably in the sport this year in the Denver Nuggets, and they push them 4 times in a row. Ultimately, they had opportunities. It's disappointing. I think you can reasonably talk about those things. And by the way, I think there's reasonable criticism of Anthony Davis. He only took, 13 shots last night? 15 shots last night?
15, yep.
Like, I think that if Anthony Davis wants to be best player on a championship team, he's got to go outside of his comfort zone and take 18 to 20 shots a night. But we can say that without being like, it's Anthony Davis's fault. He's not any good. Why do we talk about Anthony Davis as a star? Like, again, what are we doing? And by the way, we can be hard and critical without being hard asses. Like saying Anthony Davis, if he's going to play like this, if he's not going to be more assertive offensively, is not good enough to be the best player on a championship team, is still pretty pointed criticism. Like, I think if I say that, I get my point across better than, he's just not that good. Like, okay. Like, what's actually more damning and accurate? That Bradley Beal is, sorry, Brad, you're going to catch some shrapnel here. That Bradley Beal isn't that good, or that Bradley Beal is only the 40th to 50th best player in the league, and if the Wizards want to be serious championship contenders, he can't be their best player. Like, what I said is more accurate and is pretty freaking damning. Like, it gets the point across, and it leads to a much smarter discussion about the players, whether it's someone like Beal or if we go back to Davis, to say like, hey man, if you actually want to be the best player on a championship team, you're going to have to do some stuff that you have not done before. You have to prove that this is not the player you are. You have to elevate your game by being more assertive, by taking 20 shots a game. And sometimes that means being less efficient. But like, you've got to take on that responsibility. That is a smarter, better basketball discussion, a better, smarter sports discussion than this guy's the greatest, this guy sucks, and it's all about wins, rings, and doing it the same exact way that Michael Jordan did. We're just broken when we talk about basketball, and it drives me absolutely insane because I love the sport, and there's so much great strategy and nuance to the game that is very easily discussable. And then you have people on TV, on the most prominent shows, on a partner network of the league, saying that crap. It really bothers me. And like, I will admit, in part it bothers me because if the way I did it was rewarded more, I'd be making a lot more money. If I just went out, Anthony, and did Hot Take City, I could have a lot bigger contract than I have. I'd have a much bigger platform than I have. And not to complain about the one that I've got, Afternoon Drive in Washington, D.C. is pretty damn good. I am not complaining. I am merely saying that if I wanted to just put away my integrity, throw it out the window, take that journalism degree I got from Syracuse and use it as toilet paper, and just, what's the hottest take I could have today? I'd have advanced to the national level. I'd have a national show. Like, we can play that game. But I can't do that. It's not valid. It's not legitimate. It's not smart. It's not serving anybody except for myself. And I just, maybe people come across those takes genuinely. But if that's the case, like if you think it's Anthony Davis's fault that the Lakers didn't win that series or didn't win a game in that series, like, your opinion on basketball shouldn't be one that we listen to. And I guess that's my point. Is like, we got to start listening to smarter people. And we can't let the rings and doing it the same exact way that MJ did. If you don't average 30 points a game and, never lose in the finals, then you actually aren't a superstar. Because that's a discussion about Davis. Is he actually a superstar? Hell yeah, he's a superstar. Is he good enough to be the best player on a championship team? I don't know. That's a different discussion. But we can't even have it if you just say, he's not even a superstar. Because then you're not worth talking to. That's it. That's my rant. I think I'm ranted out.
I don't know where to go from there, to be honest. I really don't.
I think we just need to let me catch my breath.
Yes.
Should we do what's trending?
Yeah, because there is a game tonight.
Yeah, all right. Here's what's trending.
Here's what's trending on the Team 980.
NFL owners' meetings have wrapped up in Minneapolis. Roger Goodell has a contract extension that is being worked out. That did not get done, though. But Jim Irsay telling reporters that Goodell is set to get an extension through 2027. The NFL also tweaked the fair catch kickoff rule, trying to create fewer injuries, although a bunch of special teams coaches not a fan of the new rule that will allow players to fair catch kickoffs inside the 25-yard line and have the possession start at the 25. Then, as we said, Eastern Conference Finals tonight. Can Miami, who's favored for the first time in the series, sweep the Celtics as the Lakers just got swept We will find out 8:30 tonight on TNT. That's what's trending. I'm Craig Hoffman on the Team 980. the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Anthony, honestly, I'm not even ready to do another segment yet. I'm still coming down from the rant. That's as worked up as I've gotten on the show in a long time.
Are you sweating?
I think I was during. I think I'm okay now.
Oh, okay. This is your cool down period.
It is. Coming up at the top of the hour, Take Command. Great conversation between Logan Paulson and I about OTAs and the value of them. And we talked about Chase Young and Montez Sweat specifically. We talked about the quarterback stuff as well. But we talked about Chase and Montez before we knew that they wouldn't show up today. Obviously, that was something we anticipated could be a topic. So we kind of hypothesized when we recorded yesterday morning. So, there has been a practice since then. We do have more information, but the conversation is still very valid because it lays out the stakes, right? It lays out the stakes for what it means for Chase to show up, what it means for Montez to show up, what we would recommend if we were advising them, all that kind of stuff. So that's coming up at the top of the hour. And I'm excited to hit play on that and then go get some water because my throat hurts. I don't even know if that was good. Sometimes I do rants and I'm like, yeah, I crushed that. Sometimes I do rants and I go back and listen. I was like, you just sound angry. And I'm scared I veered into that territory. But it just bothers me, man, in case you couldn't tell.
I think there was just a lot of passion. And we know that it clearly bothered you, got to you a little bit.
I don't get why we have to go for the lowest hanging fruit all the time. Like Davis, like we can even say Davis wasn't, great in this series. It's hard with the plus minus stuff because there was the one game where they were down by a zillion and then they had to come back. But like he was a minus 10.5 per 100 possessions on the series. Like it's not great. But they lost every game. So like, what do you expect? He was a little bit worse than like LeBron and Rui and, some of the other Lakers. Austin Reeves, like, was awesome. But like Anthony Davis also had 40 points in game 1. He had 14 rebounds, 18 rebounds, 14 rebounds in games 2, 3, and 4. He had 3 blocks in multiple games. And like the whole reason they were close is because defensively he was him. Like he's the best defender in the league when he's on. And unlike, there's been guys in the past like Rudy Gobert, right? And Gobert is obviously still present as well. But like Gobert won Defensive Player of the Year, and then he got played off the floor in a playoff series. Like literally just pick and rolled to death. Because when you get in a series and you attack matchups in that way, like you can. And to an extent, the Warriors were able to do that some, but like that's the thing is like with Davis, it's only some. If he gets switched onto Steph Curry, or if he has to cover 2 guys as a roller and a driver, and the guard gets caught behind the ball handler, like he can do all that stuff. He can be in 2 places at once. Like it's ridiculous. The problem is the Nuggets are a better team. And I think that's the other thing that like is broken about our sports media discussions about a team like the Lakers, or if we talk about the Yankees or the Cowboys, like those big brands. It's like, what's wrong with the Lakers? What's wrong with the Lakers is they don't get to be the best team every year. They lost to a better team. It's fine. How do they get better? Like, that's a valid question. But you're not going to unlock the answer by going, is Anthony Davis actually a superstar? It's like, no. What is Anthony Davis capable of? How do you unlock the best of him? Is he the best player on a championship team? And if he is, then what does that mean? And if he's not, what does that mean? Like, you can have those rational discussions and be pointed with criticism, with praise, with all those things. But you don't slap meaningless labels on. And that's the thing that I think bugs the you-know-what out of me.
Yeah, I just think as far as, like, on the Anthony Davis front, the Lakers
I heard you trash-talking him earlier on the phone.
I just felt as though the Lakers weren't going to go – were only going to go as far as Anthony Davis took them. And we saw, in his performances, when he was playing well, the Lakers were winning. And when he didn't play so well, the Lakers were necessarily losing. So I think that's more so what it stemmed from, like, in the media. Like, I think people were expecting.
But, like, is the difference in the series that or having a guy face the best team in the league and consistently be great? Or is it like, hey, D'Angelo Russell, don't be terrible? Like, what's the difference in the series? In the Warriors series and the Nuggets series? D'Angelo Russell, like, he hit shots against the Lakers or against the Warriors. He didn't hit shots against the Nuggets and was just god-awful defensively. He held his own in the Warriors series. The way Murray attacked him was different than someone like Steph, and that was a problem. So, like, in a bunch of very close games, I mean, say, like, what's the difference? I don't know. They lost by 2 points last night, and Nikola Jokic hit 2 shots that he threw 40 feet in the air from 3. There's 6 points right there. Like, that's the difference in the game. Like, these are the margins on which championships are won and lost. Championships are won and lost. And if you're out on Anthony Davis because of this series, like, I just don't know what you watched. I don't know what you watched. I don't know if you understand what you're watching. Like, that's what I would say. Not that he can't be better and can't be more assertive. And I think that's a conversation that, like, a Darvin Ham should have with him this offseason. It's like, look, man, we need you to come in ready to play, first of all, to play 75-plus games. Mm-hmm. So work on your body, do what you need to do. And 2, I need you to take 18 shots a night. And it's not going to be comfortable, but, like, I need you to do it. And I'm going to bench you if you don't. And then you're going to have less minutes to do it. So you're going to have to jack up shots. And I'm just going to make it so that's comfortable for you. And like, that's what I'm curious about is can he be that guy? And if he is, what does that look like?
Yeah.
But that's much smarter discussion than, is he a superstar? Yes, he's a superstar. Take command. God, it's still only Tuesday. Next on the Hoffman Show.
The Kevin Sheehan Show.
Hoffman Show on a Tuesday, final hour here on the Team 980. You'll hear from Roger Goodell, his press conference at the owners' meetings coming up at the bottom of the hour. Preview the Eastern Conference Finals tonight as well. Real things, of course, still to come, but now it is a Take Command Tuesday. Today, we hear from Logan Paulsen on OTAs, the on-the-field off-season workouts. This is phase 2. Phase 1 is a lot of meetings and work with the strength coaches. Now they get on the field. They actually get to practice. And so what do you hope to take out of it? And what especially should Chase Young and Montez Sweat do during these periods? What's important for those two guys entering contract years? We recorded this yesterday morning, so obviously we did not know that both would not show. We had an inkling, as you'll hear during the conversation. I think that covers all the precursors. Without further ado, here is how we started Take Command. That's available in your podcast feed if you would like the entirety of it right now.
It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
Take Command podcast from Odyssey Sports. What's up? What's happening? I'm Craig Hoffman. He is Logan Paulsen. And the offseason football portion of the offseason is here, Logan. We finally reached OTAs, no more drafts, no more, maybe some more free agency, but the main focus now, what can they do on the field to set themselves up for training camp? By the way, something we'll talk about later in the show is training camp and specifically the joint practices announced. What are the benefits of those? We will talk about that later in the show. I will say we're recording this on Monday morning. And so if anything comes out of the NFL's owners meetings, we will talk about it. Of course, I will talk about it on the radio, on the Hoffman Show, 4 to 7 on the Team 980, Monday through Friday. And if there's anything that's major, we will talk about it on Wednesday's pod. Not expecting anything, but just an update perhaps on maybe a timeline around the sale. But Logan, we're going to start with OTAs on the field for the Commanders before we get to kind of a larger discussion about the offseason program and how it's evolved over the years, kind of conversation you won't hear anywhere else. But for you, what's the biggest number one headline? Like you walk into the bubble or wherever they, if they're practicing outside, wherever they're practicing later this week, where do your eyes go immediately?
Yeah, so I think it just depends on who you are in the organization, and what you're looking at. So I think if you're a scout, if you're a position coach, obviously it's like talent development and making sure your guys get conceptually what you're doing, specifically the young guys. Like, is Emmanuel Forbes the guy you thought he was? And I know this is OTAs. It's very early in the process. Like, we've covered the team for a couple of years now, you for a longer time when you're on the beat, obviously. But you want to make sure that guy you spent the first round pick on is doing what they're supposed to do. Like, I remember, Brandon Sheriff is a perfect example. I was here when they drafted him, and I remember in OTAs, you got to see signs that he wasn't quite ready to play tackle. And I think that kind of started laying the foundation for him in his career, saying, well, he's going to be an excellent guard. And so I think that that's a big part of right now. I think if you're Eric Bieniemy, like, you're trying to make sure that your installs are sequenced appropriately, that you are coaching it the way you want to coach it, the details there. And this is the foundational piece, right? Through the first little bit of OTAs, they start with day one install, like phase 1 and 2, they start with day one install. They work through, I think, like day 7 or day 8, and they restart the installs. So you really want to make sure that this foundation of knowledge, if you're the offensive coordinator, is super dialed in. So I think it's obviously everyone's got different objectives. I think for me, if I was when I go watch OTA practice, it's going to be, how do the young guys look? I think the defense is going to look really sharp. And then, how does EB look, and how does that offense look, and how does Sam Howell look in the context of the offense? And those are kind of, to me, the big things that they're not definitively answered during OTAs, but the start of that is starting to be answered, I guess, if that makes sense.
From my media seat, here's the two that I want. I'll give you one on each side of the ball. One is, what's the split of the quarterback reps? Sure. Are they getting Sam Howell? And this is just trying to put a finer point on the very obviously correct larger points that you just said, right? But if we're going to try to put a finer point on some things, what's the split of the quarterback reps? Are we having a true quarterback competition? Is this a 70-30 split? Is it a 50-50 split? Is it a 90-10 split with first team starters? How many is Howell getting? How many is Brissett getting? And, there's different ways you can do that, right? You can do 100% Sam Howell one day, 100% Jacoby Brissett the next. Like, you can just have them alternate being QB1. You can split the reps on any given day. You can, what I think they will likely do is split them like 70-30, or maybe even heavier towards Howell every day, unless he all of a sudden doesn't look very good. And then you start working Brissett in a little bit more because you're, hedging your bet that Sam's not going to be the guy when you get to August, and then you need to get Jacoby ready in this offense. Obviously, that's all part of the larger context of how's the offense being installed, how's Bieniemy doing, how is everyone coming along. But to me, like, quarterback is the obvious biggest one because it always is, and how they split those reps is important. I'll let you respond to that real quick, then I'll get to my second one, my defensive one.
Yeah, and I think that's that's important because it's not necessarily are they getting the same number of reps, it's how are they splitting the reps with the one group, which is kind of what you're alluding to there, just to kind of put a finer point on that. And because I really do believe, like, in my heart of hearts, like, having been around for a while and been with veteran quarterbacks, like, Jacoby Brissett will probably look better earlier. I think he'll understand the offense better. I think he'll understand kind of what EB is looking for, and will be a little bit easier to coach early on because he's just had more exposure to NFL offenses. So I think he'll look better earlier. And if they really want to give Sam Howell a fair shake, I think they need to be creative with the reps and make sure he's getting enough opportunity to really show he knows what's going on. So I think that is a very compelling part of OTAs. Is it going to be definitively answered in OTAs? Probably not. But I think that it is definitely something that kind of starts to inform a perspective. Like, one of the things you notice when you cover a team for a while is that, like, coaches will say something, and then the thing that is the most supportive of that is how their actions on the field. And again, this is the first time you get to see the guys on the field in a while and get to see kind of how the coaches are executing this vision that they've been articulating. Because let's say, for example, they come out and Jacoby Brissett is taking, 60% of the one reps. I think that informs a perspective. I don't think that's going to happen, but I think that informs a perspective. So this is a really cool opportunity to see that stuff. So.
Yeah, definitely. My second one, my defensive one, if you will, is who shows up on the D line, specifically the edge players.
Right. Yeah.
Montez Sweat, and that's often the sexiest headline this time of year is like, so-and-so wants a new contract. Do they show up to the voluntary portion of OTAs? And, I think a couple years ago, Jack Del Rio was pretty ticked when a couple of guys didn't show up. Obviously we've seen it last year. Deron Payne, he showed up, but he didn't do a whole lot.
He just didn't participate. Yeah.
Right. But I do think, like, that is significantly more important, or like that is a significant upgrade from not showing up at all. Right. Like, the gap between that and, like, playing is like the playing stuff is kind of extra for a guy like Payne at this stage of his career. And I would say the same for Montez, but to be in the meetings and to be around and to watch your teammates practice and, be able to watch whatever adjustments and coaching points, like, dude's had enough physical reps in the NFL at this point. Sure. Maximizing to get better. He'd be out there, but he can get, I don't know, you tell me, 70, 80%, 90% of what he needs at this point in the offseason just by being there. These are not exactly full speed reps. So if you're just there in the meetings, like, you can get most of what you need to get out of May and June. Chase Young's a little bit different story, though. And Chase, for a lot of reasons, from kind of adjusting to the speed of the game, starting at an OTA speed and then eventually a training camp speed, a preseason speed, a full regular season speed. Like, he needs to climb that ladder, gaining confidence of taking, obviously not a lot of contact, as Ron Rivera had too much contact last year, and that's why they have 2 less practices this year. But taking some amount of contact and going through football movements when they get into drills and seeing things. And there's also, like, a leadership element too, right? If he's going to be like, oh yeah, I'm a leader on this football team. Okay, well, you can't lead from California or Denver or wherever else. Like, you kind of got to be there. And so if he's going to proclaim these things as part of his upcoming contract negotiations, there's got to be a bit of show me as well. So I think it's big for both those guys to be there. I think it's huge for Chase to participate. And then for Montez, as long as he's around, like, that's good enough for me.
And we're going to talk about this in more detail in a second, but I do think it's important that fans understand, like, this is not the OTAs of 10 years ago or 15 years ago. This is a really different environment, So I do think, to your point, like how much are they actually getting out of being on the field? Probably not. Definitely not as much as it once was. I'll say that. And is that good or bad? We'll talk about that in more detail in a little bit. But I do think for a guy like Payne, for him just to show, or Montez, like Montez in this example, if he's just showing up, he's in meetings, he's doing the walkthroughs, he's doing, the individual. Payne did all the individual last year, and then he would kind of pick days and do some team. He'll do like team run one day, and then just kind of shut it down after that. Like there's a lot of value there, just being around your teammates, being around the verbiage, being around what the defensive vision is, and so I think that's extremely advantageous. And so I do think, like, as much as people were kind of poo-pooing Payne last year, I do think Payne did the right thing. He came to OTAs, he did the stuff he was supposed to do, and like quite frankly, I've talked to a couple of my buddies around the league, and like they don't really care if guys participate in OTAs the same way they used to. Right before, it was like, oh my gosh, you're a bad guy. You don't, it's different now. So I agree that so I think that's a positive, right? So if Montez comes and is kind of on the sideline with his helmet off for most of it, but he's in the meetings, he's doing that stuff, I think good for Montez, right? If Chase doesn't come, I think if I'm Chase, if I'm his people, if I'm advising him, I kind of agree with you, Craig. I think he should be doing some stuff on the field as kind of like a sign of good faith, and B, just a good way to kind of get your mind back in football. Because I think we both can agree, like when we watched him last year, he didn't look comfortable, and it's hard coming off a very serious knee injury to be comfortable. And one of the things that, like when I do a rehab or when I help with a rehab, it's just getting the athlete comfortable. And here is an environment where it's the contact is less, the speed is less, but it is mimicking football activities. And to me, as a rehab person, this is one of the best ways to kind of say, hey man, your knee's fine, right?
100%.
You don't need to take 1,000 reps a day. Take 10, 15 reps a day. Look, man, look at this cut you made. Look at this stutter move you did on the bull, like all that stuff. And so I think it'd be great for him. Obviously, he's going to make his own decision. And, it'll be interesting to see what he does, but I do think that's really compelling. And then in addition to the defensive line, I think one of the things I'm most interested in is how they're going to kind of parcel out the reps in the secondary. Like is like in this dance of musical chairs, like how does it start at least? Because how it starts isn't as important as how it finishes, but I want to see how they're using Quan. I want to see who the Buffalo nickel is. I want to see how they're using Jamin and the guy from Seattle, what's his name?
The guy that they signed.
Yeah, whatever. Corey, yeah, but anyway, Cody Barton.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
sorry, Cody. We'll get your name. We promise.
Yeah, but how they allocate that stuff? Who's playing the post? Who's playing the nickel? Because I really think like if that group comes together and is better than kind of the sum of its parts, which I think an addition like Quan Martin allows you to do, like this defense could be scary good, and I think this is the foundational piece for that.
Oh, 100%. If this team's good this year, like obviously Sam will have to play at a certain level, or Jacoby's in. Like the quarterback play can't be subpar. But if this team's like genuinely really good, it's because their defense is top 5.
Right.
And
I think they have the pieces to get that done, like, which is crazy.
Yeah, I agree. No, I 100% agree, especially if Jamin is a lot, starts at the Jamin he ended last year with and grows upon that, even maybe starts ahead of that because he's got another offseason under his belt. If Barton is a good player, obviously the D-line, and Chase is a huge part of that. Like if Chase comes to play as Chase bleeping Young, this defense could be scary. Along those lines, like kind of as a wrap-up point to all those things, to the Chase point, to the secondary point. By the way, who's starting? Is it Forbes? Do they just go ahead and be like, yeah. We know that's how it's going to end. Go ahead and put him on the outside. Or do they kind of give the veteran hat tip to Kendall and BSJ and let those guys start on the outside? But in general, like unlike the NBA and basketball, right, or even baseball to an extent, like you can simulate the game pretty easily, right? Baseball, you can get in a cage and simulate live pitching. The hardest thing is like simulating fielding situations. But like baseball is such an individualized sport, you can do the things you need to do. Guys play pickup all summer long in the NBA. There's incredible runs in Los Angeles and New York and Miami where like NBA players are playing not NBA caliber basketball, but pretty close to it all summer long in order to get ready for their seasons. You don't simulate football. Like, it's just not a thing. Like, you can do all the individual drills, and like you and I have both worked with NFL players in the off season, like trying to get them ready. You can mimic a lot of movements. You can mimic some conditioning type of situations. You can mimic a lot of stuff, but you can't simulate 11 on 11, what it's like when there's 21 other guys running around you, and you have 11 on 11 periods, and even to 7 on 7 is kind of a stepping stone to that, or whatever, your 9 on 7s, all that stuff. You have those things in OTAs. And so for a guy like Chase specifically, getting out there and simulating that and not being on bags and cones, I think is an essential step in the rehab process. So yeah. I think that actually transitions nicely to what we're going to talk about next. But to me, like, that's why it's, Chase and Montez, for instance, are in different ones, and why for the defensive backs, like getting these reps in and trying the different combinations now is essential, because you've just got to try as much as you can in these extremely limited reps and give yourselves as coaches as much information as possible to decide, whether it's a contract situation like Chase or who's going to be on the field in the defensive back situation.
Yeah, and I'm really glad you brought that up, because to me, when you're training for football, it's more similar to MMA than it is to like another field sport. And what I mean by that is, like, you can't get out there and spar all the time. You just can't do it, right? So you got to kind of be creative in the off season about, ramping intensities, working different stuff. And I train Morgan Moses, kind of help him out in the off season because he lives in the area still. And we do a lot of, special strength exercises for offensive line. And it's a position on the field that really relies on that. And I was talking to Mo, and he's like, man, I really love how this gets me in a good spot. But ultimately, like, I go to OTAs to like fine tune the mechanism, right? Because you're lined up across from other guys. So it's like, am I oversetting? Like, how do I have to sit on my punch? And it's just, you can't, as much as you try to mimic that, it's always going to be kind of low definition compared to the high definition of even OTAs. So I do think that, like, to your point, it's like, this is not what it once was, OTAs. It's still an important part of just kind of getting guys ready for training camp, getting them ready for this season. And so, yeah, I totally agree with that.
As for what we got next here on the radio show, we will take a look at what Roger Goodell had to say. Goodell spoke today on the tail end of the owners' meetings. Goodell, by the way, who's set to get an extension through 2027 very shortly. But we have Goodell on the Mary Jo White Report. We have Goodell on the Commander's Sale. We have Goodell on all things relative to Washington and their franchise future, including Goodell talking about stadium sites. You don't want to miss that. You'll hear from the commissioner next on the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, and always live on the free Odyssey app. the Hoffman Show, Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Streaming live on YouTube, youtube.com/@theteam980. Cutting up. I'm actually, Anthony, I'm almost a little bit scared. I'm cutting up in the break. I was cutting up the video of the rant from earlier in the show. And I'm like, do I want to see my own face? Do I want to know what that looked like? I guess because I don't really have a choice. It's already out there. It's out there in the world. About to be on my YouTube page, youtube.com/@Craig Hoffman. If you missed it and you're like, what rant? I ranted about the way we talk about sports. And I just think we can do better. So in an effort to do that, let's inform you, shall we? Straight from Roger Goodell, the commissioner's mouth. Goodell today asked a number of questions following the NFL's owners meetings in Minneapolis. And of course, the biggest topic is, in terms of what we're interested in, the Commanders sale. And Goodell asked about the sale and kind of the larger context around the sale, the ability to do these types of sales without having a Jeff Bezos or a David Tepper or someone who is worth, 10, 11 figures. I guess 11 would really be Bezos, but worth 10 figures, someone who's got tens plus $1 billion. And the reality of how difficult that is to sell to someone who is, quote unquote, only as rich as Josh Harris. Here's the commissioner with the latest on that. And what rules may need to change in the future to accommodate these sales?
Well, let me take it in reverse order. As far as ownership policy, that's a pretty consistent discussion amongst our finance committee and the broader membership. That's something we continually review and look to see if there are modifications that we would make. I think it's important for the ownership to be engaged in that. But it's not the only thought process pointed to your question. It's not how we get greater value. It's how do we create stability in our league amongst the 32 teams. That's the most important aspect of our ownership policies. I think your first question was the timing. Listen, when the deal gets concluded by the purchaser and the owner, we get to work. We'll work as quickly as we can. We'll do the thorough job that we need to do in the committee, and we'll make a recommendation and we'll prove it when it's ready.
I get why they have to wait, but also part of me doesn't really get why they have to wait. It's fine. Got it. They agreed to the deal. The deal was advised by the NFL. They have some things they got to work out. Please hire more lawyers and work faster. Lord knows that you can afford it. As for the Mary Jo White report, we are also waiting on that. There's been much talk about it. Here was Goodell when asked about, hey, when is this thing finally going to come out?
The investigation regarding Dan Snyder that Mary Jo White is handling started last year, February. Does it get to a certain point where you're wondering why is it taking so long?
No, Mary Jo White is an expert. She's being incredibly thorough. When she's concluded the investigation, she'll let me know. We have pledged to make sure we tell our ownership, and we've pledged to make sure that the findings are made public. So we will do that.
The last part's encouraging, right? The last part is that the findings will be made public. Okay, good. I certainly hope that the findings are straight from Mary Jo White. I hope that this is not a repeat of the Wilkinson report. I would love to see a far more extensive report, not just a summary of findings. There's a million things. We talked about it a ton. The early part, though, to me is such a cop-out by Goodell. And, he's good at this, right? He's got a political background. Roger Goodell was very, very good on Capitol Hill, not from, my perspective, not from a reporter's perspective who wants to know things. But if I'm grading him on did he do his job well serving his bosses, he did an excellent job because he's again, very good at this. He knows how to say things without really saying things or say something that sounds good where if you know a little bit deeper, you kind of rely on the fact that most people that are going to hear it don't actually know. But at the end of the day, Roger Goodell has every right to go to Mary Jo White and be like, hey, where's this report? You're working for us. Let's go. Wrap it up. What do you need? Why isn't it done? They want her to take her time for whatever reason. There is no rush. And so she's probably very happy to continue to bill them for the hours that this takes and keep it going. Eventually, it's going to drop. Eventually, it's going to come out. AJ Perez was super interesting on it earlier in the show. He thinks it's going to be pretty bad. And he also said that part of the timing is waiting for some of the federal stuff to potentially work itself out. So there's a lot of factors here, but let's not pretend like Roger Goodell couldn't not get after Mary Jo White, but like get Mary Jo White on the phone and be like, hey, Mary Jo, it's Roger here. It'd be really nice if we could get that report soon. Please have it on what you got on my desk next week. I don't see why he couldn't make that call. There is this question about retaliation. And look, I'm going to be honest. We've had Megan on the show. We've had Melanie on the show. I understand why they are concerned, why their lawyers are concerned about potential retaliation by Dan Snyder. I do not think it's something that they need to worry about. I get where they're coming from. I think there are far more pressing issues as an objective observer of this. I just don't think it's something they have to worry about, which is a good thing, right? But if you can get the legal protection, sure, go ahead. But Roger Goodell was asked about this, the idea of protecting the former employees of an organization who participated in an investigation and helped, be the whistleblowers on all this corruption and all this bad behavior. Is Snyder the type of person that could sue them? Absolutely. So he was asked about the protection and whether or not they'll get it.
There's also some concern from some of the former employees of the Washington Commanders if there's anything that could be in place or if there's any response from the NFL to protect them from any retaliation from Dan Snyder when this report comes out, even if he's the owner or not.
Yeah, as I say, we're in the midst of reviewing all the documents. A number of those issues will be discussed in the context of this, and we'll address that.
I'll also say this. I don't think that Megan Imbert and Melanie Coburn make a big deal out of this if it's something that isn't realistic. So while I can sit here and say, like, hey, and when I say realistic, something that they could realistically get, right? Something that could be a part of the sale agreement, something that could be an edict from Goodell to say, like, no, man, you can't do this. When you're done, you're done. Your association with the league is over. That includes any disputes with former employees. Like, you can't, or we will provide their legal protection and we will countersue you for XYZ. Like, I don't know how that works. I am not a lawyer. That's probably over speculation on my part in terms of, I don't even know the countersuit stuff. Like, depends on what the facts of the case are, right? But ultimately, like, what I do know is Lisa Banks, who is an attorney and a very good one, is someone who has pressed this issue. And if she wasn't pressing it, it wouldn't be a part of the discussions. And Goodell says it's part of the discussions. As for when Josh Harris eventually takes over, he's got a stadium to build. Here's Goodell on the ongoing discussions with the District of Columbia on the RFK site and others.
Yeah, listen, I've had the conversation with the mayor. I've had conversations with others in the Washington, D.C. region. As you probably know, I grew up in Washington, D.C., going over to RFK Stadium. So I understand the passion of the fans in Washington. I think that's something that the new ownership is going to have to address. It is not something we're requiring in the context of the transaction. But I know that the new ownership will be focused on it just from the limited conversations I've had with them. So
there you go. They will be focused on the new stadium. I'm still pretty fascinated to see, how hard does Maryland push? What kind of public money is available for Virginia? Where the hell did that $1.5 billion number in the ESPN story come from? Again, that's not an ESPN number. That is a number that was on the prospectus that Seth Wickersham got his hands on at ESPN. So that's Josh Harris's number, not ESPN's number. They just were the ones who reported the sheet of paper. So is that something based off discussions that they've had, or is that something that they think they can get based off of other precedents, whatever other discussions they've had that are less formal and less with the people involved? So I'm really fascinated to see where that goes. Clearly the league wants to help here. They would like to get a new stadium in Washington ASAP. Nobody likes playing at FedEx. They don't like putting FedEx on television in its current state. They don't like any of it. So the faster they can move, the better. cut through the red tape, help with the financing as much as there's allowed to, all that kind of stuff. The league will be there for the new stadium. Of course, Goodell also asked about non-Commanders things. One of the big ones is sports betting. And this is becoming quickly a very thorny issue for the league. They've already had the suspensions that swept up amongst other Shaka Toney from the Commanders. Jamison Williams, the most notable player that got suspended, 6 games for him. And there's, according to Adam Schefter in a report the other day from ESPN, there's another wave of players that's going to get suspended, that they're already looking at a second, like, I don't call it a gambling ring, but a second wave of players who are going to get swept up in the league's gambling policy. And part of the problem is the extension of what is a team facility is incredibly wide. And so, as I talked about it at the time that all that news broke, if like Jamison Williams was at the team hotel Saturday night before an away game and puts a bet on Alabama, his alma mater, like that's a suspendable offense. And it doesn't seem like in the modern betting ecosystem that's sustainable. It's you're not actually protecting anyone. It's very, very stupid. And it's just a very odd place and subjective place to draw the line. So with that said, Goodell's got a huge decision to make moving forward about what that policy looks like. Goodell asked about it today.
Yeah, Jared, I think we expressed this concern when when the Supreme Court overruled PASPA. So it's been an issue for us since day one. It's one that why we always said we have concerns about legalized sports betting. But the Supreme Court makes a decision. We have to modify our approach. But we've always said the integrity of the game is number 1, 2, and 3 for us. And so we focus on that every single day. You educate, you try to make sure that people understand our policies. You have mechanisms in place to, if people do violate the policy. I think the fact that we have people that have violated that, obviously, that we know that education is not foolproof. We're dealing with a lot of personnel. This isn't just about players. It's coaches, league office, everybody in the NFL. We all have to be vigilant on that. And so we'll continue to do that. But we're also not going to, if we see someone who's violated, you're going to know about it. And I think that's the most important thing, is to enforce it consistently and make sure that people understand that is ongoing. I don't know much about other leagues or whether they have violations or not. I know the NFL has had it, and we've been very clear about that.
Leagues are concerned, and I do think that the NFL has a chance to lead here. The problem is no league wants to lead. Nobody wants to be first. Nobody wants to set the new rules and allow more in than already is. Like, it's complicated. It's thorny. Like, there's a lot of ways in which this could become very sticky with a lot of gray area. But it does feel like some of the stuff that is black and white right now is on the wrong side of that line. And the NFL, what the NFL doesn't want to do is have a bunch of players who get suspended for something that really isn't, like, there's no reason to prevent it, shouldn't be suspendable, and then they're hurting their own product for no reason. So if you want to outright say, if you're an NFL player, you can't gamble on sports, you can't bet on a fight, you can't bet on an NBA game, college football, whatever. Like, okay, that's one way to handle it. But this, like, you can, but not on team property. And team property, by the way, also includes your team plane. It includes not only the practice facility, your stadium, which, by the way, some of the stadiums have sports books now. It includes your team hotel on the road. Like, there's just a lot of stuff that seems unnecessary. And to pull back the reins and treat your players like adults seems like a far better solution, I should say. That's most of what Goodell said today. If you want to read more, find your local reporter who was there. Your local radio show did the best we could with the time allotted. The Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. When we get back, we will have Real Things Real People Said into real microphones and a quick preview of tonight's Eastern Conference Finals. But first, here is what's trending.
Here's what's trending on the Team 980.
Roger Goodell not only speaking today, but discussing with the league's ownership an extension. It is mostly good. Jim Irsay saying it'll be through 2027, but not finalized yet. That expected perhaps at the same special meeting that will eventually be called to vote on the Commander's sale, which of course did not happen at this meeting in Minneapolis. One interesting comment from Goodell on that, by the way, is something that is an ongoing discussion is when Goodell retires, do they split the current commissioner role into someone who is more of a football commissioner and then someone who is more of a CEO role for the business? So Goodell could be the last modern NFL commissioner. He will be in that job, it looks like, till at least 2027. Eastern Conference Finals, 8:30 tonight on TNT. We'll talk about it next here on the Team 980. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. What a show, what a show. All right, Anthony, time for our 45-ish second. Man, we probably got 2 minutes. Eastern Conference Finals preview. Do we need 2 minutes?
I think that should suffice.
So you think the whatchamacallits?
The Celtics?
The Celtics, they're gonna. I've already forgotten their names. You think they're gonna get the series back to Boston?
All I'm saying is they're threatening the Heat. Don't let them win one game. Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart have been very vocal. All it takes is one game. However, I do not think they win tonight's game.
Yeah, I struggle because they're obviously great. Like they're just a really excellent basketball team that's super talented, and they've just missed a ton of shots in this series, and I could see, like, if you told me, hey, what's the path for the Celtics to be the team that does this? I see it. It's not that hard. Like, they just hit a bunch of shots that they've been missing. And by the way, if they law of averages it and they go ballistic, like the games won't even be close. Do I think they'll do that? No. They look like a team that was broken. And they just sometimes you look at a team and you're like, they're done. I think this group is done. And that's sad because I think they're, if they kept it together in the way the Nuggets kept it together, like, could they get back to the finals and maybe win it? I think they could. But there's also a time sometimes where you gotta mix it up. And I don't know whether it's, obviously Brown is the most logical guy. You're not giving up Tatum, but is it like Smart who goes or Horford, is 38? Like, they got to do something to get over the hump. And if I'm them, I probably wind up keeping it together. I probably just sign Brown. I sign Tatum, or I keep Tatum. I give him his extension when it's time. I keep Smart together. I hope that Horford retires, and that's the spot that I can go to. Not because Al's a bad player, it's just something new. And you go from there. But I do think it ends tonight in Miami. In part two, because I think Miami's got a bunch of killers. Like, that team is some bad dudes, like good dudes, bad dudes.
And they're missing Tyler Hero, which is crazy.
Right.
But do you think, because I've been seeing, Joe Mazzulla's being outcoached, do you think
that's what
all of this comes down to Eric Spoelstra just destroying Mazzulla? Coaching.
Not all of it, because according to Second Spectrum, the NBA's tracking data, the Celtics have gotten better shots in the series. They just haven't made them. So, are they really getting destroyed in that way? It's hard to say, that's the only reason.
Yeah.
But I do think there's a motivation thing. I do think there's a focus thing. I do think there's an adjustment thing. There's just been moments in this series where, the Celtics have needed to slow the F down. And it's hey, slow down and get the ball to Jason Tatum at the top of the key. And, if I was in the last game, right, things are starting to get away from us, I would go to Jason Tatum and be like, oh, you're humbly one of the best players in the world, huh?
Go show it.
Huh? And I just walk away and see what happened. See if I could piss him off. That's the kind of stuff that I don't know that Joe Mazzulla's done. I don't know that he hasn't either, but it just feels like little things, whether it's motivation and focus or hey, I don't know if y'all heard, but this dude's one of the best players in the world. So we're gonna put him at the top of the key, and you work that stuff in schematically, and it hasn't. They just done the same stuff, and they've had the same result, and they're expecting different, and that seems like a huge mistake. All right, time for a quick by the way, first official prediction. Go.
I have the Heat tonight with that broom.
So do I. By the way, good thing you didn't break the broom that your boy left you.
That was a good thought, but didn't have to.
Alas. All right, time for real things.
Real things.
We're not going to be sucked this year.
Real people.
5 and 11. Not very good.
Set into real microphones.
The culture is actually damn good.
Allegedly. So, LeBron James, is this it? Have we seen the last of the King? Here was James' post-game presser yesterday after the Lakers get swept.
I like to say it's a successful year because I don't play for anything besides winning championships at this point in my career, and I don't get a kick out of making a conference appearance. I've done it a lot, and it's not fun to me to not be able to be a part of getting to the finals. But we'll see. We'll see what happens going forward. But I don't know. I got a lot to think about, to be honest. And just for me personally, going forward with the game of basketball, I got a lot to think about.
He does. I think ultimately there's two quotes, two sets of quotes kind of. He told Dave McMenamin and Chris Haynes both, I'm considering it. We'll see when it comes to retirement. But he also said, I'm so better than 95% of the league, and so why would I? And I think that's true, and I think the fact that Bronny's a year away also definitely plays into it. Tomorrow on the show, we got what do we have actually locked in? I never read the comments tomorrow. We're hoping to have, I think we'll have Standig tomorrow. We got Ron Rivera speaking tomorrow morning. A little bit more of Take Command. So good show. We'll see you then. BetMGM tonight is next here on the Team 980.